Hello. So, this is going to be an impromptu discussion about fear. I've talked about fear before. If you aren't familiar, I've made a video about it, discussing it from my own perspective. And I was talking to myself earlier, and I decided I wanted to make something public. This is something that really irks me. I am pretty well immersed into the world of, you might say, conspiracy theory stuff. And I really enjoy it. It gives me a different perspective on pretty much everything I've ever thought I knew. It changes everything that you think about. When you see people talking about the codes embedded into popular media, the pedophile thing, and the deep state and the big club and all these other organizations that seem to be in charge of everything. And then you have all these movies and stories coming out, and their predictive programming, what's going to happen in the future, like The Simpsons and Leave the World Behind and Utopia and all these other movies and whatnot. And everyone's claiming this is coming and that's coming and all the rest of it. So I wanted to just kind of come out and talk about fear in more of a long form way, more of a just a unscripted discussion. I thought the last one went pretty well, so I wanted to go ahead and do it without a script again. So I want to first rehash what I've discussed about fear in the past. There are various theories about what fear is, the fear response. Usually it's referred to as the fight or flight response. It's a psychological concept where your body has recruited certain chemicals, certain molecules, like adrenaline, mainly from your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. And it produces this adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and it starts your body into this cascade of responding to a threat. So fear elicits the fight or flight response, right? This is something I think everybody understands. But what's happening inside your body physiologically is not what's happening inside your mind during a fear response. Now, let's say that you see a bully, right? Some bully walks up and, he looks like he has your number and your name's on a list somewhere and he's going to get you, right? Well, you see that thing and, you get girded up, your muscles tense up, and you get ready to run or you get ready to fight, right? This is a standard trope of, what happens in a confrontation. Well, here's the thing about world events. You're seeing things like COVID that came out, and a lot of people are afraid because this virus is invisible. You see the media putting out this narrative about it, and all these people are dying, and it's this big boogeyman that's behind every corner. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's wearing a mask. Everybody's afraid to talk to each other. Nobody knows really what's going to happen anytime that you see somebody cough. Stuff like that. So there's this big fear narrative surrounding this invisible demon that's going around infecting people's cells. And then this vaccine comes out, right? And then all these stories about people just dropping dead from the vaccine, and stories about, or rather reports about myocarditis, and I saw some of this myself in my hospital work. There's a lot of fear going around. That's just one. There's there's probably about 1,000 circulating at any given time. So there's a lot of talk about the end of the world. There's a lot of talk about demons showing up out of nowhere, alien talk, and all these wars that are breaking out, Ukraine, the Gaza war. I'm not gonna belabor the point by pointing out every single fear narrative that's floating around, but the core of all of this is the fear response, the psychological fear response that goes on in the heads of the citizenry, of the world population. Now, I want to start with the religious perspective. So, one of my first experiences with fear was hell. This is something I think most people are familiar with. Most religions have a hell narrative. So, what is hell? Hell is the place where you go when you're bad, or you're not one of God's favorite, or you don't believe the right thing, or whatever. There's some reason you go to hell. Some reason that you're allowed to be blamed for going to hell, right? So this is something I think everybody's familiar with. Very standard trope of religion. You also have the heaven, which gives you this good bad dichotomy that can guide the entire school of ethics to create this two-sided value scale that you can apply to literally everything in the world, right? It's this very complex thing, but fundamentally it all comes down to fear of the unknown. So if I was to come up to you and say, hey, there's this big furnace underground that if you don't give me $5 right now, you're going to end up there for 10 years, burning and burning and burning unless you give me $5 right now. You would look at me and probably laugh, and you would say that's absurd. What do you what? No, that's dumb. So first you're thinking about the physics of it, the human body can't burn for 10 years. Secondly, there's obviously a personal interest I have in getting you to believe me, right? Well, here's the thing. What if somebody did believe me and they gave me $5? Why did they give me the $5? They gave me the $5 because they're afraid of what I've told them, right? So, you look at that and you say that's absurd. The other person, let's say that's person B, they say, "Oh, I don't want to burn for 10 years. Well, here's $5. That's not a big deal. I can give you $5 and save myself from burning for 10 years." So in their minds, this is a very real threat. If it wasn't a real threat, as far as they're concerned, they would not give me $5. Okay? Now, we'll just juxtapose that on top of the hell narrative coming from religion. Well, the thing about religion is, it's a lot of people that believe this. There's a massive, massive number of people that believe this. Say you're a Muslim, Islam teaches about hell. Islam has a very strong hell narrative, just like Christianity, just like religions derived from the Hebrew Bible. So there's this really heavy, incestuous, I'd say, relationship between the Western and Middle Eastern ethos and the hell narrative. People aren't all that excited about heaven. They're more concerned about avoiding hell. Heaven's great and all, but, hell is really, really bad. It's very visceral. You've never really experienced anything like heaven, but you've definitely experienced and had a lot of experience with viewing things that depict a place like hell through movies and whatnot. Somebody created a story. That story got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, like stories, tend to do over time. And eventually you have this massive hell narrative that's inset into the psyche of a society. Everybody believes it. Everybody takes it for granted. They all have their fire insurance, so now they're not worried about it, so it's not really a big topic of conversation. But imagine now you're part of that community and they have this big hell narrative to push on you. And you're just like, what? Huh? No way. Are you serious? You bought that? But the thing is, in their society, let's imagine that this is an enclosed society where everybody believes the same thing. They take it for granted that this is a real place, and they're absolutely going to go there unless they do X, Y, and Z. Unless they sacrifice a virgin during the equinox, they're going to go. The entirety of this collective body of humans is going to be in hell, burning forever. Let's imagine some scenario where that's the case. Well, look at the society you're in right now. The society you're in has a very deep set, at least awareness, whether it's visceral or not, at least an awareness of this very deep hell narrative. Everybody knows what it is. A lot of people don't believe it, especially compared to the way it used to be. But there's this very powerful, deeply rooted hell narrative that I think most people are aware of. Now, what happens when that visceral fear is pervasive throughout a society? Well, you have society that is looking for relief from this imagined threat. Now, here's the thing about this imagined threat. An imagined threat is more terrifying than a real threat. An imagined threat is only limited by the extent to which your imagination can take it. So, when you see a real threat, you act on that threat. When you have an imaginary threat that you actually believe is possible, that threat has no limits. Your imagination can take it as far as your imagination can take it. Okay? So they say that it doesn't pop up until after you're dead. So in your mind, this threat is as possibly bad as your imagination can possibly go. So the fear is much, much greater, or at least the fear response is much, much greater with an imaginary threat than it is with a real threat. A real threat has physical characteristics that you can define and see the limits of. The thing about your imagination is, practically, it's unlimited. Your imagination can take something very, very far, just like kids do. And let's look at it this way. Adults are old children. Adults are old children. Children are not young adults. Adults are old children. There is no dividing line between an adult and a child. That's the fact of it. Adults are kids. Adults are children. So, they use the same psychology. They use different words. They have more life experience by which they can use logic to understand the reality of things, to take things seriously or not, to reject things or accept them. But at the end of the day, adults are just old children, not the other way around. Kids are more susceptible to lies. Adults are also susceptible to lies. It depends on how developed psychologically they are. So, when you're talking about fear, the perception of fear happens when there's an imaginary threat, not when there's a real one. So one of the things that kept me from getting sucked into the COVID narrative was the fact that they changed the definition of what a vaccine is. A vaccine, what it is a safe way to introduce a pathogen to the immune system, whereby your immune system can mount an attack on the invading pathogen without allowing it to infect you. That's what a vaccine is. A vaccine presents basically body parts of a virus to your immune system, so your immune system can quickly identify it and remove it. That's what a vaccine always has been. All of a sudden, it's now shielding or armor to keep you from going to the hospital or dying. That doesn't make sense at all. Nothing about the COVID vaccine makes any sense whatsoever. So for me, as a nurse, I had some background in this, and I was not afraid of it. I was not afraid of this virus. I really wasn't. Because the way that I put it all together, the way that they were describing the symptoms, this is a pneumonia. I've dealt with pneumonia in the ICUs for a very long time. I'm familiar with this. It's like, but they weren't treating it that way. I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of it, but I didn't get sucked into it because I had some basic understanding of medicine and virology and whatever. Everything changed. And so, my bullshit meter was going off like crazy. I'm like, this is bullshit. So I'm not afraid of it. A lot of people are, though. A lot of people are terrified of this thing because it's an invisible thing. They've heard about polio, they've heard about, all these other viruses in the past, and they're terrified. I could die. Grandma could die. I could give it to grandma. It would be terrible that I had killed my own grandmother, killed my loved ones. I can't let that happen. So I'm going to wear the mask. I'm going to do whatever I have to do. I'm going to work for the better good of society, blah, 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 blah. And so this fear narrative was much more impactful on uneducated people, those who are not educated in medicine or nursing. I imagine it was much more effective on those people because their imaginations defined the threat, not reality. Their imaginations defined the threat. Okay? Now, take religion. How bad is hell going to be? What happens? Let's have some fun. Hell is actually like a shitty version of heaven. Let's imagine that is actually what it is. Okay? Let's say that somebody had actually gone there. They were like, yeah, the pool is kind of dirty. It's kind of like a Hotel California where you can't actually leave. It's kind of run down, but it's fine. It's whatever. But in your head, you have this image of fire-breathing dragons eating people, and demons walking around with knives stabbing you for eternity, and you immediately heal up, but you feel all the pain. Blah 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 blah. You have this horrific image in your head, right? But you actually get there. Let's say that you die in your sin. Dun dun dun. You die in your sin. You go to hell, and God says, "Okay, you're going down there, and the next guy you're going up there." And heaven's just a really nice version of hell, and hell is a really dirty version of heaven. But it's not like some torture chamber that you've been told about, right? You get down there, you're like, this isn't that bad. You just don't get all the benefits. What is the reality of this place? Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows what hell is really like. Is it actually real? Nobody knows. It's why belief is so important in religion. Are you afraid of what you've been told? Because that's really what it comes down to. So let's take it back to COVID. Are you afraid of what you've been told? How many bodies have you seen in the streets? What's the reality of it? You don't know what the reality of it. The best thing that you can do is say, I don't know. I'm not going to fire until I see the whites of their eyes. I'm not going to freak out until I see bombs dropping on my city. If it drops on my house, well, I won't notice because I'll be dead. I don't know. I don't know is the right answer. Because as soon as you say, I don't know, but, and then you fill in the blanks, you are going to subject yourself to unimaginable fear. Why? Because you really think it's going to happen, but you don't know the nature of what the threat is. That's the problem. You don't actually know. You don't actually know what the nature of this threat is. You just know that there's a threat out there that people are talking about. So it's important, I think. And I've never heard anyone characterize fear in this way. This is how I characterize it. Fear is the expectation of an imaginary threat, not the visualization or the interaction with a real threat. A real threat you simply respond to. If you see the armies walking towards you, you find a way to get the fuck out of there. That's what you do when you're faced with a real threat. You act on it. You address it. You see a big spider, you burn the house down. Just kidding. But you see a big spider, you kill it. Right? You get the spray out, you get the big bowl, whatever. You call the exterminator, you deal with the threat. Not so with an imaginary threat. An imaginary threat is only limited by your imagination. So when someone comes to you, okay, I'm like I said, I'm really deeply really deep in this conspiracy theory stuff. I find it to be really fascinating. Sometimes it does yield some good information. Sometimes it yields bullshit information. But it always gives me a new perspective that I can draw on to see things in a different way, which I find invaluable in this world of crazy bullshit that's constantly flying around. So, it gives you this outside perspective on a lot of things, especially government actions and geopolitics. So, I just wanted to put out a message to help, hopefully, anybody who is afraid of what's going on, what you see on the news, what you see on social media, what you see on all of these channels that are pushing this fear narrative. The end of the world is coming, and they've been saying that shit for 3,000 years. The end of the world is nigh. The end of the world is coming. Be afraid, be afraid, be very afraid. You've been hearing this shit forever. Nothing ever happens, but people are afraid of that shit. They're really afraid of that. Are you afraid of something? What are you afraid of? Is it an actual threat that you can actually respond to, or is it imaginary? If it's a real threat, there's going to be physical consequences. If it's an imaginary threat, there's no physical consequences. So it might as well not be real. So the point is, when you think about fear, if you find yourself being afraid of something, figure out if it's your imagination defining the threat, or if it's an actual threat that is self-defined, that is self-evident. If it's not something that's self-evident, stop being afraid of it and just respond to it. That's all you need to do. If they say that the dollar's collapsing tomorrow, and they say that you need to buy gold, you have to ask yourself. So wait, guy, hold up. Back up 5 steps. You are telling me that the dollar is going to collapse, but you want my dollars. Is that what you're telling me? You want to give me gold, which is actually valuable. At least that's what you say. But you want my dollars, which are going to be worthless tomorrow. That's what you're trying to tell me. Why do you want my dollars? That doesn't make sense. If I was a gold broker, I would not be selling it. If I was a gold broker and I thought that the US dollar was going to collapse tomorrow, I would not be selling my gold for worthless cash. This is retarded. And then you got the people that are like, the world's going to collapse tomorrow. You need to buy my buckets of rice. You need to buy my freeze-dried food that can sit in your basement for 25 years. And I'm like, you want me to pay $5 for like a freeze-dried packet of green beans when I could get, I don't know, a can of green beans that can last for 2 years that I could eat within that span of that time and then just replenish it? Yeah, I think that a major crisis would be over, or I would no longer have access to that food in 25 years. So you want me to buy this overpriced freeze-dried food rather than just going to the grocery store and buying canned goods. Is that what you're telling me? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. This doesn't make sense, dude. This sounds like a grift, and it is. There's no actual threat yet. Yeah, okay, so if you really think that the world is going to collapse tomorrow, do you think your gold is going to be valuable? Seriously. Okay? If this is a real emergency, who wants your gold? Who wants your fucking gold in an actual emergency? Nobody is going to want your gold, man. No, they're going to want food. I'll tell you the most valuable commodity in an emergency situation when we get kicked back to the Stone Age. It's not gold, guys. It's labor. Labor is the most valuable commodity in an emergency situation. Labor. Okay? You got trees. That's firewood. That's heat. That's cooking. Okay? You got animals. Okay? You got all kinds of materials, like physical materials that you could break down. You see an empty house? Do you realize how much raw materials are in an empty house? The house itself, for one. You could board that shit up and set up a hunting nest, on the roof. You could do all kinds of shit in an actual emergency situation. Okay, you're not going to be sitting in your basement eating your 25-year shelf life freeze-dried food and your buckets of rice, man. This is stupid. Imagine yourself in an actual emergency. Okay? Imagine yourself in an actual emergency. You got those buckets with the freeze-dried food in it down in your basement, right? You got to add some water. Okay. So you're adding the water, you're mixing it up, and I don't even know how they reconstitute it. I really don't. But you got your stuff. Okay, so in a couple months, you run out of it. Okay, so you've been able to live in your basement for a couple months. Great. Now what? Well, you're exactly where you were if you didn't have that shit. Okay, so you got your canned goods. You run out of it in a couple months. This is an actual collapse of society. This is an actual collapse of society. There is no more infrastructure. I'll tell you what the best thing would be. Immediately, when everybody's still panicked, find a group of people that you can combine forces with. Okay? That's the best thing that you can do. Not sit in your basement. Get the fuck out there and start combining forces. Because you're going to have competing, roving bandits and shit. You're going to have competing groups of people that are going to be competing for resources. So the best thing that you can do is find a local community that you can join up with. That's the best thing you can do. So think about it and visualize an actual collapse of society and see what the actual things that you need to do are. Go camping. Figure out what you need for a bug out bag. Sure. Have that on hand. Find out how to hunt. Have enough ammo. Learn how to work with bows and arrows. Bows and arrows are extremely effective in an emergency situation. Have yourself a fire starter and a bunch of matches or a bunch of lighters, whatever. But these motherfuckers that are going around trying to sell you gold because the dollar that they're trying to get from you is going to be worthless. Okay, this is stupid. Buy gold if you want to do some kind of commodity investing. But my God, man, buying gold for an emergency situation is probably the dumbest thing I've ever. It's the dumbest grift on the internet, in my opinion. Secondly, these freeze dried buckets of rice and whatever, retarded. You got the. I'll tell you what. Those solar flashlights, meh. That's a pretty good idea. I'll tell you what's better is the ones that you shake up. Those are better than the solar ones because the solar ones you can get a short in one of those. The shaking ones you can actually shake it and get more power generation that way. But anyway, I digress. I'm just watching the grifting go through the roof on the internet. Because everybody's worried about societal collapse. Well, I can tell you this: society, I don't think is gonna collapse. I really don't. I'm sorry, I just don't think it's going to. I think this is a lot of fear. I think they're trying to do their whole divide and conquer bullshit, and it's fucking working. Why? Because people are terrified. If you can terrify people, you can get them to do whatever you want. Okay, let's jump into the whole control aspect. Okay, let's feed the hell narrative to an unsuspecting society. The societies out there, they're going about their business. They're milking their goats or whatever, and they're killing their prize calf for the winter solstice, right? And you come out and you say, "There's gonna be a hell. Everybody needs to come to my church," and so everybody shows up because they're afraid of the hell that you throw. Well, then you say, "Well, now you need to fund this operation, so give me 10% of all your income," which, by the way, sounds a lot like a tax. But again, I digress. So the people that are selling the hell narrative, okay, the people that are selling the hell narrative are making a lot of money off of it. You have to think about this. Who is benefiting from the hell narrative? Not you. You're afraid of it. You're afraid of it. Who's benefiting from the COVID narrative? Not you. Somebody else is. Who's benefiting from selling gold? Not you. You're getting the gold, but they're getting your cash. Well, guess what they can do with your cash? They can spend it. Yeah. They can fund their operation. They get your cash because your cash has not collapsed. So because this is a fiat currency, I don't even think it can collapse, to be honest, given that, the commodity markets are what they are and blah 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 blah. It's just not the same. It's just not the same economy as it was back in Zimbabwe when they had their hyperinflation, or the Deutschmark went under, and what was that, the tulips in Holland when the tulip crash came, and all these things that they used to prop up this idea about hyperinflation. It's just not the same economy. I don't know what the rules are now, but they're not the same rules as back then, so you can't draw the same conclusions from those conditions. It's a different situation. It's just a fucking different situation. So, juxtaposing the old rules on the current economy just doesn't work. It doesn't. 2008. That was supposed to be a total collapse of the economy. They're talking about everybody's going to die, and everybody's going to freeze to death and whatever. Well, 2008 came, it went, the stock market dropped, and people lost a lot of money on that, but the people that got in 2009 and 10, they're making off with some big money. Some big cash money. Cash that has not collapsed. So, what I'm trying to get at here is that everyone is trying to scare you. Everything is trying to scare you. I'll tell you the truth of it. If you want to stay healthy, stop being scared. Stop being afraid. Okay? If they want you to be afraid, tell them to pull a knife out. If they want you to be afraid, tell them to point a gun in your face. Okay? Don't be afraid until you see the barrel of the gun pointed at you. At that point, then react. But don't react until you actually see a real threat. Because a real threat can be responded to. An imaginary threat cannot. It's going to stay inside your head, and there's no limit to it. It is unlimited. The threat that is created in your imagination is unlimited in scope. It is as powerful as your imagination can make it. Fear is bullshit, is what I'm trying to say. Okay? They want you scared. Everyone wants you scared. Why? It's good business. Of course they want you scared. Are you going to let them? I wouldn't. Don't be scared. Just look at your options and take the one that makes the most money for you. Take the one that makes the most sense to you. Look at your situation, look at the options in front of you, and pick one. That's all you got to do. Fear is bullshit, man. You're only afraid of an imaginary threat. You respond to real threats. You're afraid of imaginary threats. And the reason you're afraid is because you're always helpless. You're always helpless in the face of an imaginary threat. Why? Because an imaginary threat is only limited by your imagination. Like hell. Hell is imaginary until you show up there. It's as terrifying as your imagination can make it. Will you ever actually show up there? Who the hell knows? You don't know. Neither do I. But I can tell you, the reason you're afraid of it is because you think it's real, and your imagination is defining it. I don't know what happens after I die. And you know what? I'm not going to know until after I die. I accept that. I didn't know what life was going to be like before I was born. I know now. But I couldn't prepare for it. How are you going to prepare for something that you don't know? You can't. How do you prepare for societal collapse? You can't. Think about that. Everything they're telling you to be afraid of, is it real or imaginary? If you're afraid of it, it's imaginary. If it's something you can directly respond to, you're not afraid of it. You just take action. That's all. So use that as a guiding principle as you constantly hear fear narratives swirling around, slapping you in the face. There is nothing to be afraid of except your own imagination. A real threat is responded to. An imagined threat is something to fear. Fear is an emotional response to an imaginary threat, because an imaginary threat is unlimited, because it's only limited by your imagination. I hope that makes sense. The power to define is the power to control. If they can define what is in your world, rather than your world being self-evident, they can control your actions, your thoughts, your beliefs, and everything else. Don't let them have that power. So this was just a quick video that I just felt like getting off my chest. I'm constantly seeing fear narratives surrounding everything from top to bottom. Everything in the world is being pushed out as a fear narrative. Be afraid of this, be afraid of that, be afraid of this, be afraid of that. Everything is sensational. Everything is fantastic. I don't see anything out my window. And I never do. I wonder why that is. You know, how much of this shit is staged? How much of this war footage is staged? When the Ukraine war was going on, and they came out with those video game movie clips of, I don't know, those automatic turret guns that are shooting at aircraft. You know, it's video game footage. It's fake. It's fake as fuck. And then they're saying that there's these bombings happening in Kiev, right? They're saying Kiev is being bombed left and right, and then they got this reporter in Kiev, and he's talking in front of the camera, and right behind him are all these street lamps that are completely lit up. He's talking at night in front of all these street lamps that are lit up. I'm like, so Russia is bombing Kiev like there's no tomorrow, but they're letting the lights stay on. That's dumb. That's dumb. How much of this war footage was fake? I don't know. But I can tell you, a lot of it looks fucking fake. You know, they're talking about pulling up the draft again. My God. You know, they're saying, you know, we're gonna start up the draft and we're gonna send your daughters off to go fight on the front for Ukraine. Are you Come on, man. This is dumb. You know, how many, like, they're out here in the middle of a fucking field with these pre-made tunnel systems in the middle of the forest in Ukraine, and they're going out there with the body cams, and they're fighting and they're shooting and all this other stuff. And they're just going out in the middle of a field. There's like a pack of five dudes walking down the road, maybe an APC. There's a bomb that goes off and it kills the five dudes. They never come out like a normal army. They never come out like a normal army versus a normal army and the best man wins. That never happens. In the middle of a fucking field. In the middle of nowhere. They got these five dudes, 6, 10 dudes, in this small cluster team formation or whatever. They're just sitting ducks right out there in the middle of nowhere. And a bomb drops. You have these drones flying around. Nobody looks up. Look, I've seen drones. I've heard drones. They're loud. They're really loud because their props have to spin really fast. Nobody looks up. There's a bomb that drops and it goes off. Boom, you know. How many of those drone bombings are real? I don't know. But it doesn't look real. It just doesn't. These isolated teams of dudes out in the middle of nowhere, just walking around. It looks fucking fake to me. How much of the Gaza footage is real? I don't know. But a lot of it looks fucking fake. I see this one dude in this one shot, and then in another shot he's running from the left, and in the other shot he's running from the right. He's holding the same baby, but they're different locations. And he's like yelling at the camera, practically pointing at the kid in his arm, you know. And I mean, this looks fucking fake to me. You know, I'm seeing all kinds of fake footage out there. You know, everybody's talking about the Houthi rebels are coming to demolish. I mean, the Houthi rebels, are you? And then you got the Palestinians. The Palestinians are living in an open air prison, right? That's the story. They can't leave. You know, the Jewish army is controlling them. Nobody can leave. Nobody can come in. They got tunnels everywhere, and they just can't beat Hamas because Hamas is so powerful because they have tunnels, man. They're just the IDF is completely incompetent. They just can't win in tunnels, you know? I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're all claustrophobic or something. But I'm like, you can't win in tunnel. You can't you can't win in tunnels. You can't win in tunnels. Really? You can't you can't win in tunnels that you know the locations of. You can't just fill both ends with concrete. That's not an option? Really? We're gonna flood them with seawater. Are you insane? Just fill the fucking things with concrete. It's that simple. It's not even hard. And then you got to ask yourself where you know Hamas is being funded by Israel. But you know they're so powerful. Oh my God, we just can't get them. And so they're carpet bombing, you know, Gaza. And you know the Jews are like, oh yeah, we're still the good guys because we got to get the Hamases. And all this genocide talk is coming out, but then you got the fake footage where they have working hospitals in an open air prison. You know, all the buildings look like they were recently erected. They all look exactly the same. It's like watching a movie. I gotta be honest. It looks like a movie. It looks like a stage. I know. I'm probably a bad person for saying that, but it looks like a fucking movie to me. It looks like a stage. Props. You know, you got the narrative, you got the plot, you got the script. This guy comes out, that guy comes out. They're all talking about this fake event. That's what it looks like. And, like they're trying to make it sound like World War III is gonna break out. Oh my God, World War III is gonna break out. Oh my God, scary stuff, right? Scary, scary. Just imagine what a World War III could. Wait, stop. Imagine what World War III will wreak on the world. Just imagine it. Stop. What did we just say? Fear is the response to an expected threat, which is imaginary. It's imaginary. Okay? Till you actually see the bombs drop, I'm not concerned. Sorry, not doing it. Not playing your game. Again, I know that probably makes me a bad person or whatever, but it is what it is. I've been lied to way too much for this. I am not concerned about any of it until it actually happens. Once it happens, I'll respond to it. I'm not responding to the threat. Make threats all you want. I don't believe you. None of you. Gaza, Ukraine, the dollar, none of it. I'm not concerned. In fact, as far as I can tell, the world is really fucking boring. Nothing ever actually happens. I see a lot of shit going on the screen, and yet when I go into a Walmart or I go into a grocery store, somehow, after basically decimating the entire food production of the United States, that's another fear narrative I keep hearing about. They're going to decimate the entire food production. All these food packing places and all these meat packing places, they're all staffed by immigrants, and the immigrants are being pushed out, but the immigrants are coming in through the southern border, millions and millions a day. But they're bombing and they're blowing up and they're burning down all these food processing plants and blah 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 blah. Yet somehow, which is really weird, I go into a grocery store, all the shelves are full. I don't know what that's about. Did they have like a bunch of meat that just doesn't go bad, just waiting in storage somewhere? I don't know. It's weird. So that's what I wanted to get out to you. I wanted to send out a message of fearlessness, because you know what? I'm not afraid. All they can do, the worst they can do, is kill me. I'm not afraid of this. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, I'm ready for the next adventure. As far that's that's where I'm at. I'm ready to go. They want you scared. Why? Because the power to define is the power to control. If they define in your own mind what's in your world, they own you. That's the narrative that comes out about the flat earth. I do not think that the earth is flat. I really don't. Mainly because of the existence of the southern celestial pole. Southern celestial pole is not possible on a flat earth. I'm sorry, guys. I just don't buy it. Unless you can explain to me how a southern celestial pole can exist on a flat earth, I don't buy it. Period. That's a smoking gun as far as I'm concerned. The earth is a globe. Until you can explain to me, reasonably and conclusively, how a southern celestial pole exists on a flat earth, I cannot buy it. So this is a globe world, but there's nothing to be afraid of. That's basically, my message is fearlessness. Don't be afraid of shit. Make them point the gun. Make them pull the knife. Make them drop the bomb. But don't let them make you scared. Because the only thing that you're afraid of is your own imagination until that happens. So that's all I have to say today. Be well. Thanks for listening.